The Mage will receive quite a few changes in Mist of Pandaria, together with new spells as well, and those I'll be covering in this video. Alter Time is a spell all mages will get no matter their specialization. When you activate this, then for the next 6 seconds you can for example be running around and taking damage, but after the 6 seconds and when this buff expires, you will be taken back to the location when you activated Alter Time, and this is also the same case for my health, mana, buffs and debuffs. An example, here I activate my instant cast, then I activate Alter Time and cast my instant cast spell. Once Alter Time expires, I will then be able to once again use my instant cast, also known as Presence of Mind. And for those of you who likes to PvP, it's gonna be quite fun to use this spell to bait people to chase you, and as a flag carrier you can that way also get away and hopefully score. We're also getting a new passive, Burning Soul, which reduces the cast time loss from taking damage attacks by 70%. This will of course not count if you have any damage over time effects on you. Our Frost Armor is being changed. It now increases your spell haste by 7%. It's still reducing enemies' movement speed by 30% when you're being hit. But another change has happened. Now it's no longer a 1 hour buff. Instead, when you die, it will persist through death. And this is also the same case with Molten and Mage Armor. And talking about Mage Armor, it now increases your mastery by 3000 at max level and also reduces the duration of harmful magic effects on you by 25%. Where in Cataclysm, it increased your resistance and mana regen. Fire Blast is still in the game, but as a Fire Mage you will instead be getting Inferno Blast. It's always guaranteed to crit, and if there's for example a Pyroblast, Ignite or a Combustion effect on a target, it will be spread up to 3 of these when you use your Inferno Blast. Talking about the fire specialization, your Combustion has also been changed, a way lower cooldown, and it now also stuns the enemy for 3 seconds. What's even better is that you could be using an Inferno Blast followed by Combustion, and Combustion will then reset the cooldown of your Inferno Blast, allowing you to cast 2 of these in a row. Our remove curse has been changed. Instead of not having a cooldown and only removing 1 curse from a friendly target, it will now have an 8 seconds cooldown, but also remove all curses from that friendly target. Deep Freeze is now a skill you will be learning by default. Yeah, you can even use this if you're going to play Arcane or Fire. Pretty useful, as this used to be a Frost specialization skill only. In addition to this, all mages are also getting the passive Shatter, increasing their critical strike chance by 50% against a frozen target, so you can either use a Frost Nova followed by a huge burst, or even a Deep Freeze. The Mage table are finally receiving an awesome change, not requiring any Arcane Powder. So when you're going to do dungeons, raids, or maybe even PvP with this class, well then there's no longer an excuse for not being able to summon the table. In Cataclysm, our Arcane buff increased our mana, but also spell power by 6%. In Mist of Pandaria, this is now 10%, but instead of increasing your mana, it now increases your critical strike chance by 5%. A new glyph I'm looking so much forward to is Glyph of Illusion. You'll be taking a look of someone else close to you, whether it's going to be a friendly or hostile target. Polymorph has received a small change. Instead of being able to be casted up to 35 yards, this is now 30. And our Ring of Frost has been removed from your spellbook. Instead, this is no longer learned by default, but you will need to pick this as a talent at level 45. I will get back to the talents in just a moment. Talking about removed spells, Flame Orb has also been removed by default. Onto some good news, we are getting yet another passive, Nether Attunement. As you're getting more haste, your mana regen will also be improved. And while we're at the good news, Blowfall no longer requires Light Feathers or the glyph to be used. No, you can simply cast this whenever. And our Fireball is now Fire Specialization only, but you can still cast Frost Firebolt as Arcane and Frost Mage. With the changes being covered, let's move on to the talents. Starting at level 15, Ice Flows. A new thing that has a 20 seconds recharge, and you can activate 3 charges in a row. They last for 15 seconds and allow you to be running and casting the next spell, or well, the next 3 spells if you activate 3 in a row. Blazing Speed, a spell you can activate even as you're casting, and this will increase your movement speed by 150%, but it only lasts for 1.5 seconds. Last but not least, Presence of Mind. Yeah, an old Arcane talent that allow you to cast the next spell instantly as long as the cast time is originally less than 10 seconds. So for example, an instant polymorph. At level 30 we can pick different defensive skills, starting with Ice Barrier that absorbs damage, lasts for 1 minute and only has a 25 seconds cooldown. Flame Glow that absorbs damage from each individual attack, and the better gear, the better absorb. This is of course also the same case with Ice Barrier and Temporal Shield. This shield will reduce your damage taken by 15% for 4 seconds, and all the damage you took during those 4 seconds will be healed back over the next 6 seconds. And pay attention, it can for example also be activated when you're stunned, frozen, or any of the other 3 effects. At level 45 you can pick Frostjaw. This will silence and freeze the target in place for 8 seconds, and you can combine this together with Ice Flows. Against PvP targets, it's half the duration. So you start using the 1.5 seconds cast time, even as a healer is about to cast a heal, and then they will simply be silenced, and you can follow up with a Deep Freeze or another CC, for example Polymorph. Ice Ward is a spell you can either cast on yourself or a friendly target. The player with Ice Ward will then be struck by an enemy, and that enemy and all other enemies within 10 yards of the player will simply be frozen in place for 5 seconds. And at level 45, this is also the time where we can pick Ring of Frost. We can also combine it together with Ice Flows, allowing you to precast this and start dragging all the enemies to the location, without having to stand still. Cold Snap is now available to all specializations. At level 60 you can pick this talent, and it resets the cooldown of your Ice Block, Frost Nova and Cone of Cold. In addition, it also heals you for 30% of your maximum health. Cauterize will prevent you from dying from the next attack. Instead it will bring you back to 50% of your maximum health, but over the next 6 seconds you will be taking 40% of your maximum health as damage. You can however prevent this by activating your Ice Block. But remember, this passive has a 2 minutes cooldown. Greater Invisibility will remove 2 damage over time effects and also instantly turn you invisible. While you're invisible, all damage taken is reduced by 90%, and this is also the same case 3 seconds after coming out of invisibility. At level 75 we can pick different kind of AOE spells. First one, Frost Bomb, a bomb that will explode after 4 seconds, dealing a high amount of damage, but also a decent amount of damage to all targets within 10 yards of the current target. The downside is definitely that it has a 10 seconds cooldown, while Living Bomb has no cooldown, but you will also manually need to cast this on many different targets. Just be aware, you can only have Living Bomb running on 3 different targets, but the good thing is that all of those will then be taking damage and eventually explode and dealing a high amount of AoE damage to all nearby targets. Nether Tempest that deals arcane damage over 12 seconds, and each time it deals damage, it will also do 50% damage to a nearby target within 10 yards. This you can place on many different targets to do spell cleaving damage. Just remember, this is not AoE, as it won't be dealing damage to all nearby targets. Once you get to max level, you can choose a new ward that also absorbs damage over 8 seconds. As it's absorbing damage, it will restore up to 18% mana, and once the ward expires, it will also increase your spell damage. The more damage you manage to absorb, the more spell damage you will also have increased for 25 seconds. Another insane thing is that you're getting a passive that increases your spell damage by 6% and mana regen by 65% as long as you don't have a cooldown on this ward. Else you can also choose a new spell, Rune of Power, that replaces your evocation. This can be placed on the ground. You can have a total of 2 of these at the same time, and they last for 1 minute. There's no cooldown, and as you're standing within 5 yards of your own rune, your mana regen will be increased by 75% and your spell damage by 15%. And when you're standing in the rune, you will also be gaining 1% maximum health per second. The last option is a passive that removes the cooldown of your evocation, also reducing its channel time and duration by 50%. When you complete a full evocation, your spell damage will be increased by 15% for 1 minute, but you will also passively regen 50% less mana. But since there's no cooldown on your evocation, you could then channel this when you need mana or a new spell damage boost. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you're interested in the other classes, and there are changes, then make sure to either check out the description or my channel. Soon I will also publish a lot of other useful Mist of Pandaria guides. so make sure to subscribe to the channel to get notified when I post those.